In just 49 seconds, one of music's biggest legends completely lost it on live television. What started as a simple conversation about aging in Hollywood turned into a full-blown screaming match that had Cher throwing her microphone and storming off the set while Joy Behar sat there looking absolutely stunned. This wasn't just some little disagreement. This was a total meltdown that nobody saw coming. Before we get into this absolutely wild story, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this industry. Now let's get into what went down last night. The View was packed with audience members who were excited to see Cher. She's a legend, an icon, someone who's been in the business for decades. Everyone thought this was going to be fun, light, maybe some laughs about her career and her new projects. The other hosts were all smiles, welcoming her to the table with hugs and cheers. Whoopi gave her a big hug. Sunny was grinning. Sarah was clapping. Even Joy seemed happy at first, shaking Cher's hand and telling her how great she looked. Cher sat down in the guest chair, wearing a stunning black outfit with her signature long dark hair flowing down her shoulders. She was smiling, waving to the crowd, blowing kisses. The energy was good. The audience was pumped. This was supposed to be a celebration of one of entertainment's most beloved figures. Joy started off with some basic questions. "So Cher, you look absolutely incredible. What's your secret?" "Pretty standard stuff, right?" Cher laughed and said something about staying active and not caring what people think. The audience loved it. Everyone was nodding along, smiling, having a good time. Then Joy asked about Cher's career and how she's managed to stay relevant for so long. Again, pretty normal talk show question. Cher talked about reinventing herself, taking risks, not being afraid to try new things. She mentioned how she's never let anyone tell her what she can or can't do, especially as she's gotten older. The crowd cheered. This is what they came to hear. But then Joy said something that changed the whole mood in the room. She leaned forward with this weird smile and said, "But Cher, come on. You've had a little help staying young though, right? I mean, we all know you've had work done." You could feel the air shift. The audience got quiet. The other hosts looked uncomfortable. Cher's smile dropped for just a second, but then she recovered and laughed it off. "Well, Joy, haven't we all done what we need to do to feel good about ourselves?" She was trying to keep it light, trying to deflect. But Joy didn't let it go. She kept pushing. "No, but seriously, you've had quite a bit of work done. Multiple surgeries, right? There's no shame in it. But let's be honest here." She was saying this with that tone. You know, the one where someone acts like they're being friendly but they're actually being kind of mean. Cher's face started to change. You could see her getting uncomfortable. She shifted in her seat and said, "I don't really think that's appropriate to talk about, Joy. That's pretty personal." Her voice was still calm, but you could hear a little edge creeping in. The other hosts tried to jump in. Whoopi said something like, "Hey, let's talk about Cher's new music," trying to change the subject. But Joy was not having it. She actually cut Whoopi off and said, No, I think this is an important conversation. Women in Hollywood face so much pressure to look young, and Cher is a perfect example of that." Cher put her hand up and said, "Excuse me, but I'm not an example of anything. I'm a person sitting right here, and you're being really rude." Her voice was getting louder now. The audience was dead silent. Everyone could feel this was going south fast. Joy acted all innocent, like she couldn't believe Cher was upset. "I'm being rude? I'm just being honest. Everyone knows you've had plastic surgery. It's not a secret. Why are you getting so defensive?" She had this smug look on her face, like she thought she was being clever or something. That's when Cher really started to get heated. She leaned forward and said, "You know what, Joy? Just because you're insecure about your own aging doesn't mean you get to attack me on national television. This is bull." She almost said the full word but caught herself at the last second. The audience gasped. Oh man, it was getting real now. Joy's face turned red. You could see her getting angry. She shot back, "Insecure? I'm not the one who's had my face completely reconstructed. At least I'm aging naturally and honestly." Cher laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was that angry laugh people do when they're really pissed off. "Naturally? Joy, you sit here every day with a full face of makeup, professional lighting, and you're going to lecture me about honesty? Give me a break. The other hosts were trying so hard to calm things down. Sarah was saying, ladies, let's all take a breath here. Sunny was nodding, trying to agree. But Joy and Cher were locked in now. They were barely even listening to anyone else. Joy stood up from her chair. Stood up. That's how heated she was getting. You know what your problem is, Cher? You can't handle the truth. You've built this whole image around being this rebellious, honest person. But the second someone calls you out, you fall apart. Cher stood up too. Both of them were standing now, facing each other across the table. The audience didn't know what to do. Some people were uncomfortable. Some people were kind of excited to see this drama unfold. Cher pointed her finger at Joy and said, "The only thing I can't handle is your disrespectful attitude. I came here thinking we were going to have a nice conversation, and instead, you ambushed me with this personal attack." Joy crossed her arms. "Oh, please. You're so dramatic. I asked you a simple question about plastic surgery. If you weren't so insecure about it, it wouldn't be a big deal." That word, insecure, that's what really set Cher off. She raised her voice and said, "I am not insecure. I'm confident. That's why I've had the career I've had. You're the one who seems obsessed with my appearance. Maybe you should look at yourself and figure out why you're so bothered by other women." The whole studio was tense. Production people were probably freaking out behind the scenes. The cameras were still rolling, catching every second of this disaster. Whoopi tried one more time to intervene. Okay, we need to all calm down here. This is getting out of hand." But Joy wasn't done. She looked at Cher and said, "You want to know what bothers me? It bothers me that women like you set impossible standards for aging. Young girls look at you and think they need surgery to be beautiful. That's what bothers me." Cher's eyes went wide. She could not believe what she was hearing. "Are you seriously trying to make this about young girls? You invited me on your show, you attacked me personally, and now you're trying to act like you're taking some moral high ground? That's pathetic, Joy. That's really pathetic." Joy's face was bright red now. She was so angry, she was practically shaking. "Pathetic? You're calling me pathetic? At least I have the guts to age gracefully instead of running to a plastic surgeon every time I see a wrinkle." The audience was in shock. Some people were gasping, some people were just sitting there with their mouths open. This was not normal talk show behavior. This was a straight-up fight happening on live television. Cher grabbed her microphone off her dress and held it in her hand. She looked directly at Joy and said, "You don't know anything about grace, Joy. All you know how to do is tear other women down to make yourself feel better. That's not grace. That's just mean." Joy stepped closer to the table. "I tear women down? You're the one who's made millions off looking perfect, while real women struggle with their self-image. Don't you dare lecture me about being mean." Cher shook her head. She looked disgusted. "I've never claimed to be perfect. I've always been open about my struggles, my insecurities, everything. But you sit up here on your high horse judging everyone else while you're just as flawed as the rest of us." Joy slammed her hand on the table. Like actually slammed it. The sound echoed through the studio. "Don't you talk to me about flaws. I've worked my entire career to get where I am, and I didn't do it by changing my face." Cher threw her hands up in the air. "Oh my God, Joy, nobody cares. Nobody cares about your opinion on my face. This is my face, my body, my life. You don't get a say in what I do with it." The other hosts were completely frozen. They didn't know what to do anymore. This had gone way beyond anything they could control. Sarah looked like she wanted to cry. Sunny was just staring. Whoopi had her head in her hands. Joy pointed at Cher aggressively. "You come on this show acting all high and mighty, but you can't even handle one tough question. You're a coward, Cher. A coward who hides behind plastic surgery and auto-tune." Oh snap, she went there. She really went there. The audience let out a collective gasp. You could hear people saying, "Oh no," and "she didn't," under their breaths. Cher's jaw dropped. For a second she just stood there, completely stunned that Joy had actually said that. Then her face hardened. She looked furious. "You know what, Joy? You're a bitter, jealous woman who clearly has nothing better to do than attack your guests. This is the most unprofessional thing I've ever experienced." Joy laughed, but it was a mean laugh. "Unprofessional? You're throwing a tantrum on my show because you can't handle criticism. That's unprofessional." Cher picked up her purse from beside the chair. Everyone in the audience leaned forward. Was she leaving? Was this really about to happen? Cher looked at Joy one more time and said, "Criticism? You call that criticism? That was a personal attack and you know it. You should be ashamed of yourself." Joy crossed her arms again and said, "The only thing I'm ashamed of is wasting airtime on someone who can't handle a real conversation." That was it. That was the final straw. Cher looked at all the other hosts and said, "I'm sorry you had to witness this." Then she looked back at Joy. "But I'm not sorry for standing up to a bully." Joy's eyes went wide. "Bully? Are you calling me a bully?" Cher started walking toward the edge of the stage. "If the shoe fits, Joy, if the shoe fits." Her voice was cold now. "Done with the whole thing," Joy yelled after her. "Fine, leave, run away like you always do when things get tough." Cher spun around one more time. She was at the steps now, about to walk off the stage completely. She pointed at Joy and said, "The only tough thing here is sitting across from someone so bitter and miserable that they have to tear down a guest to feel important. I feel sorry for you, Joy. I really do." Joy's face was purple now. She was so angry she could barely speak. She managed to sputter out, "Get out, just get out of here." Cher didn't need to be told twice. She turned back around and walked down the steps. The audience was in complete chaos. Some people were clapping for Cher. Some people were just sitting in shocked silence. The other hosts didn't know where to look. The cameras were still rolling, catching every moment of Cher's exit. As Cher walked through the audience toward the exit, you could hear her heels clicking on the floor. Nobody was talking. Everyone was watching her leave. She held her head high, didn't look back, didn't say another word, just walked straight out of the studio, like the absolute legend she is. Joy stood there at the table, breathing hard, her face still red. The other hosts were trying to figure out what to say. Whoopi finally broke the silence. Well, that was something, but Cher was already gone. She had walked out of the view, and from the looks of it, she wasn't planning on coming back. The door closed behind her with a loud thud that everyone in the studio could hear. That thud was like the final punctuation mark on one of the most dramatic moments in talk show history. The audience was buzzing. People were talking to each other, looking at their neighbors, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The producers were probably having a complete meltdown backstage. This was not how things were supposed to go. This was supposed to be a fun, friendly interview with a beloved star. Instead, it turned into an all-out war between the guest and the host. Joy sat back down in her chair, still looking angry. The other hosts were trying to compose themselves, shuffling papers, looking at their notes, anything to avoid the awkward silence that had filled the studio. Sarah cleared her throat and tried to say something about taking a commercial break, but her voice was shaky. Meanwhile, somewhere outside that studio, Cher was probably getting into her car, still furious about what had just happened. She had come to the view expecting a normal interview, a chance to talk about her life and her career. Instead, she got ambushed by a host who seemed determined to embarrass her on live television. The whole confrontation had lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. From the moment Joy made that first comment about plastic surgery, to the moment Cher walked out that door, the tension had just kept building and building until it finally exploded. And explode it did. What made this whole thing even crazier was that these are both powerful women in entertainment. Cher has been an icon for decades, winning awards, breaking barriers, doing things her own way. Joy has been a prominent voice in television for years, known for speaking her mind and not holding back. You'd think two strong women like that could have a respectful conversation, even if they disagreed, but instead, it turned into this massive blow-up that nobody could have predicted. The audience members who were there are probably going to be talking about this for years. Imagine being able to say you were in the studio the day Cher stormed off The View after a screaming match with Joy Behar. That's the kind of story you tell at parties, the kind of thing that becomes legendary. Back at the table, the hosts were trying to regroup and figure out how to move forward with the show. But how do you move forward after something like that? How do you just go to the next segment like nothing happened? The energy in the room was completely destroyed. Everyone was still processing what they had witnessed. Joy was sitting there, arms still crossed, jaw clenched. You could tell she was trying to justify her actions in her head, trying to convince herself that she hadn't done anything wrong. But the looks on the other hosts' faces told a different story. They were uncomfortable, maybe even disappointed in how Joy had handled the situation. Sunny finally spoke up, trying to address what had just happened. "That got really heated, really fast," she said, stating the obvious. Nobody else knew what to say. What could they say? They had all just watched their co-host get into a massive fight with one of the most famous women in the world, and there was no taking it back. The thing is, this wasn't just some random disagreement about politics or current events. This was personal. Joy had made it personal by going after Cher's appearance, by questioning her choices about her own body. And then, when Cher defended herself, Joy doubled down instead of apologizing or backing off. She kept pushing and pushing until Cher had no choice but to leave. The cameras finally cut to commercial, giving everyone a chance to breathe. But the damage was done. The confrontation had happened on live television, in front of hundreds of people in the studio and probably millions watching at home. There was no pretending it didn't happen, no sweeping it under the rug. Backstage, you can only imagine what the producers were saying. They were probably running around trying to figure out damage control, trying to decide whether to address it when they came back from commercial or just move on to the next topic. Either way, they had a situation on their hands. In the studio audience, people were still talking among themselves. Some were defending Cher, saying Joy had crossed the line. Others were shocked at how quickly things had escalated. Everyone had an opinion about what they had just seen. What made Joy's behavior even worse was the hypocrisy of it all. She acts like she's this champion of women, someone who stands up for women's rights and women's choices. But the second Cher made choices about her own body that Joy didn't agree with, she attacked her for it. That's not feminism. That's not supporting women. That's just judgment dressed up as concern. And the way Joy tried to make it about young girls and beauty standards, that was just a cover. If she really cared about those issues, she could have had a thoughtful, respectful conversation about them. Instead, she used them as an excuse to be mean to her guest. Cher saw right through it, which is why she called Joy out on it. The irony is that Cher has always been someone who's challenged beauty standards in her own way. She's done things her way, made her own choices, lived her life on her own terms. She's been an icon for people who don't fit into society's boxes. And here was Joy, trying to put her in a box, trying to shame her for choices she's made about her own body. Cher's decision to walk out wasn't a tantrum like Joy suggested. It was a woman standing up for herself and refusing to be disrespected. She gave Joy multiple chances to back off, multiple opportunities to change the subject or apologize. But Joy kept going, kept pushing, kept attacking. So Cher did what anyone with self-respect would do. She left. The walkout itself was powerful. Cher didn't scream or yell as she left. She didn't throw things or cause a scene on her way out. She simply said her piece, stated her boundaries, and exited with her dignity intact. That's class. That's strength. And that's probably what made Joy even angrier, because Cher refused to be the out-of-control villain that Joy was trying to paint her as. As the commercial break continued, the reality of what had just happened was probably starting to sink in for everyone involved. This wasn't just going to be forgotten. This was going to be talked about, analyzed, replayed, and discussed for a long time. The View had hosted thousands of guests over the years, but this moment would definitely go down as one of the most dramatic. For Joy, this wasn't going to look good. No matter how she tried to spin it, the facts were clear. She had invited a legendary performer onto the show, attacked her appearance and her personal choices, and then acted shocked when that guest got upset and left. Most people watching at home were probably on Cher's side, wondering why Joy felt the need to be so nasty to someone who had done nothing to deserve it. The other hosts were in an awkward position too. They were caught in the middle of this mess, having to sit there and watch it unfold without being able to stop it. They probably felt bad for Cher, embarrassed by Joy's behavior, and unsure how to handle the aftermath. The View is supposed to be a place where they have different opinions, but still respect each other. This was the opposite of respect. What this whole incident really showed was the importance of treating people with basic human decency, especially when you have a platform like The View. Joy had the power in that situation. She was the host, on her own show, in front of her own audience. Cher was the guest, there to promote her work and have a conversation. Joy abused that power by using it to humiliate and attack her guest. That's not okay, no matter who you are or what show you're on. The fact that Joy tried to frame her attacks as some kind of important social commentary about beauty standards made it even worse. If she genuinely wanted to have that conversation, there are a million better ways to do it than ambushing a guest with personal comments about their appearance. She could have asked thoughtful questions about the pressures women face in Hollywood. She could have had a nuanced discussion about aging and beauty standards. Instead, she chose to be mean, and then tried to justify it afterward. Cher's response throughout most of the confrontation was actually pretty restrained, considering how aggressive Joy was being. She tried multiple times to deflect, to change the subject, to keep things civil. It was only when Joy kept escalating that Cher finally matched her energy and fought back. And even then, Cher's points were valid. She called out Joy's hypocrisy, her judgmental attitude, and her disrespectful behavior. Those weren't insults. Those were facts. The moment when Cher called Joy bitter and jealous probably stung because there was truth to it. Why else would Joy be so fixated on Cher's appearance? Why else would she keep pushing this topic when it was clearly upsetting her guest? It seemed like Joy had some personal issue that she was projecting onto Cher, and Cher wasn't about to sit there and be a punching bag for Joy's insecurities. When Joy called Cher a coward and brought up auto-tune, that was a low blow designed to hurt. It had nothing to do with the conversation they were having. It was just Joy trying to inflict maximum damage because she was losing the argument. Cher had been making good points, standing up for herself, and Joy couldn't handle it. So she lashed out with a personal attack meant to undermine Cher's entire career. That showed Joy's true character in that moment. The audience's reaction throughout all of this was telling too. They gasped at Joy's mean comments. They seemed supportive of Cher. Some even clapped when Cher finally decided to leave. The people in that room could see what was happening, and most of them didn't like it. They had come to see Cher, to celebrate her, and instead they watched her get attacked by someone who was supposed to be a professional interviewer. As Cher walked out of that studio, she was probably feeling a mix of emotions. Anger, definitely. Disappointment that what should have been a fun appearance turned into such a nightmare. Maybe even a little satisfaction that she stood up for herself instead of sitting there and taking the abuse. She had maintained her dignity while Joy had lost hers. The door closing behind Cher wasn't just the end of her time on The View that day. It was a statement. It said that she valued herself too much to stay in a situation where she was being mistreated. It said that fame and platform don't give anyone the right to be cruel. It said that there are consequences for treating people badly, and sometimes that consequence is them walking away from you. Inside the studio, that closed door left behind an awkward, tense atmosphere that nobody quite knew how to handle. The show had to go on, but how could it after what had just transpired? Joy was sitting there, probably still convinced she had done nothing wrong, while everyone around her was processing the disaster that had just unfolded. This whole incident will probably be remembered as one of the most dramatic moments in The View's history, and definitely not in a good way for the show or for Joy. It showed what happens when someone lets their personal feelings override their professionalism, when they prioritize being provocative over being respectful. And it showed that even legends like Cher have their limits, and when you push them past those limits, they're not going to stick around to be your punching bag. The confrontation, the escalation, the dramatic walkout, it all happened so fast but felt like an eternity for everyone involved. From that first inappropriate comment about plastic surgery to Cher's final words before walking out, the whole situation was a masterclass in how not to treat a guest on your show. Joy had the opportunity to have a great conversation with an icon, and instead she created one of the most uncomfortable moments in talk show history. That closed door, that final thud, marked the end of Cher's time on The View, but it marked something else too. It marked the moment when a legend decided she'd had enough. When she chose her self-respect over staying in a toxic situation. When she showed the world that even in the face of aggression and disrespect from someone with a platform, you can still walk away with your head held high.